Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Colony Drop, a Gundam podcast. My name is Brian.
And my name is Isaac. This is the Gundam podcast where we talk about everything from the models to the manga to OVAs to anime series to the live action movie and anything and everything else Gundam related.
That's right. And today we are continuing our journey into the next 100 years of the Universal Century to prepare ourselves to whatever Bandai plans to throw at us next. And what are we talking about today, Isaac?
A very special Gundam movie. It was called Gundam F91.
It's interesting that you chose the adjective very special to describe this film.
What I mean by that is this is sort of a unique situation where a movie was released to kind of kick off a series, but things didn't work out that way.
Yeah, I think there may be a lot of baggage to unpack here. So why don't we start with some quick background facts. So fact number one, this is a movie, which is already, we don't have that many Gundam movies, so it's kind of strange already. Yeah. Right? It was released in March of 1991, so it's very old relative to today's standards. It's 29 years old, basically. We're going on to pushing 30 years here. And if you want to watch it today, you can either watch it on Blu-ray or it was recently added in early November to the official Gundam YouTube channel, which is Gundam Info. It's on there now for free. I'm assuming that Bandai Sunrise figured, hey, this thing's 30 years old. We might as well put it out there for free. I doubt many people are going out and buying the Gundam F91 Blu-ray, but maybe.
Let me just say, I have the DVD. I don't have the Blu-ray.
I have the DVD as well. I do, yeah.
Did you go to Suncoast and buy it like I did?
Probably, or that, or Amazon, very early on Amazon for sure. And so, a quick synopsis. This is what today's page on Amazon says. So if you're going to look out, trying to find this movie today, this is what you would see. Universal Century 0123. After a generation of peace, the Earth Federation has begun to build new space colonies to house humanity's growing population. But a new force, the aristocratic Crossbone Vanguard, plans to seize the colonies of the newly constructed frontier side for itself. As their home becomes a battlefield, a handful of young civilians struggle to escape the conflict. To save his friends and family, the reluctant warrior Seabook Arno becomes the pilot of a new Gundam, which bears the codename F91. So that all sounds pretty good. I think I'm on board. If you're a Gundam fan, you read that. Are you on board with that today, Isaac?
You're ready to go. You're like, oh boy, Zeon's out of the picture. Let's see what the next chapter is.
Yeah. But before you watch this movie, if you're out there, if you're listening to this and you've never seen Gundam F91 and that sounded good to you, I think there's some background facts that Isaac alluded to that you need to keep in mind, which may be helpful before watching this movie, or it may help you view it in a different light. So this movie was originally planned as a full-length 50-ish episode TV series to kind of mark the 10th anniversary of Gundam, but production was stopped due to staff disputes apparently. And at the time, I guess they only had 13 episodes written. And so at that point, they kind of just said, all right, well, we're going to take what we have and we're going to turn it into a movie instead. If you take a step back, that means this story was designed to be conveyed over about 20-ish hours, right? 50 episodes, 20-something minutes per episode.
Sure.
So it's being compressed 10 times over what it was supposed to be.
Yeah.
And so I think that's just important to keep in mind. I mean, what do you think about that, Isaac? I mean, that's just...
Well, my first question is, what kind of staff disputes were going on? Like, I'm not too familiar with, labor rights in Japan, but like, was this a union issue with like the writers and the animators or something?
That's a good question.
Yeah. Beyond that, though, like, I just feel like, how did Gundam not have the staying power where people were able to say, okay, we need to make something quality if we're doing our first story without Zeon? We kind of owe it to the fans that we had to stick the landing. And not to get too ahead of ourselves, Brian, but I must say F91 does not stick the landing. So it's clear that based on what you said, there were essentially problems on day zero. Before it was even a movie in production, it was a series in production, and the series really just spun out of control and didn't actually happen. So we ended up with a 2-hour movie.
I didn't dig super deep into what those staff disputes were, so maybe there's some more information out there. I mean, if you know off the top of your head, let us know.
I'll say this though, Brian. This movie completely feels like they took a story that was maybe 13 episodes of what should have been a 50 series, season, and they just crammed those first 13 episodes into 2 hours because story-wise, this doesn't really have a satisfying conclusion. It doesn't conclude the sort of political situation they're in, and the fates of the main characters aren't really concluded either. So it definitely does feel like they threw episodes together into a movie.
Oh yeah, for sure. I feel like they even threw so again, they had 13 episodes written, and it feels like they had, I don't know, 4 to 5 episodes mostly done, and I feel like that was kind of what we watched for about the first 45 minutes. And then after that, we started going a million miles a minute in terms of plot progression, and
Yeah.
just it was kind of like, wow, what is happening? It was very jarring, and we'll get there. But the last thing I'll say is, people might think, you might be listening to this and saying, well, if production was stopped, why did they even make the movie? Like, why not just cancel the whole thing? And that's a legitimate opinion from the perspective of a fan. But I think if Bandai Sunrise, you're the person that has spent all the money to make that much of the film, to hire everybody. The same is true in Hollywood. Once you've made the investment, you need to get something out of it. And that's why they probably went, well, we have something here that we can put out, and we can try to at least, recoup what we've done. And so my guess is that's kind of what happened.
Yeah, and I don't know if maybe you'll disagree with this, but at a certain point, or from a certain point of view, this movie feels like Gundam by the numbers, right? Mm-hmm. If you watch the original series, there's almost a counterpart to everybody in this movie.
Yeah.
So even though they sort of turned the chapter, right? Zeon's gone. They turned the page. It very much feels like a repeat almost of Zeon causing problems, except it's not Zeon, it's Crossbone Vanguard. So take from that what you will. Maybe you disagree, but I imagine, like you just said, Brian, somebody probably stepped in higher up and said, okay, whatever unique story ideas we had for this 50 episode plan, we're going to do Gundam by the numbers, and we're going to make back our money.
Yeah, I agree. I think had we gotten the 50 episodes, maybe there would have been more of that differentiation that probably does exist.
Right.
And
yeah.
But who knows? I mean, I think maybe we would have ended up something closer to Crossbone. I don't know. Really.
Yeah.
It really depends.
Yeah.
So let's jump into the story, Isaac. Why don't you start us off? Tell us a little bit about the story here.
Okay. Before we do that, though, Brian, is this your first time seeing F91 or not? For me, this might be my third.
This is probably my third as well. I first watched it on the DVD, probably like you did, and then I also. Oh no, you know what? No, I think I had ordered the DVD. I had like pre-ordered it because remember back when we bought it, was probably like 2004-ish when it first came out. At that point in time, again, this was a long time ago. So back then, if a new Gundam was coming out, you really had to go order it because you didn't know how long you'd be able to find it. Like Zeta Gundam came out around the same time, and I remember that was just so hard to get a hold of if you didn't pre-order it like on day one. And so when they when they were putting out F91, I was like, well, all right, I got to buy it, And I think before it came, I think I went to an anime convention. It was probably Anime Expo some year or something.
Of course.
And I think they showed F91. So I think actually the first time I saw F91, it was at an anime convention in one of the screening rooms, which is actually pretty cool. It's as close as I'm going to get probably to ever seeing this in a movie theater.
Right. Yeah.
Barring some weird event where they show it at a movie theater in America 30 years later. I don't think it's going to happen, but maybe. So you've seen it 3 times as well?
Probably. I'm pretty sure I bought it, watched it, and then maybe a little while later watched it again. And then for this podcast episode, I watched it recently. And I must say, the story isn't engrossing enough to warrant like a lot of repeated viewing, right? Like I'd rather watch like episodes of a show. Like I'd rather watch Iron Blooded Orphans again or something than watch F91 multiple times. I'm sure you feel the same since you also have seen it 3 times in the last 14 years.
Yeah. I will say that before the third viewing for this podcast, I didn't remember much of it. It's one of those things in Gundam where outside of the manga, outside of Crossbone Gundam, this doesn't really come back too much, so you're not really thinking about it if you watch another series, for example, if you watch original Gundam and then you watch some of the side stories, you're still like kind of thinking about all that 1 Year War stuff all the time, and so it stays fresher in your mind. But you kind of just there's really nothing that connects to this in the filmed works too much. So if you just watch this and you kind of never see these characters again, at least in animation, so you kind of forget about them, and that's kind of how I was before this third viewing. I didn't remember much going into it at all. Really.
Yeah. I remember the broad strokes of the story, but what I did while watching it is I took notes almost as the movie was playing, just sort of scene by scene in a way. And boy, does the plot logic sort of just collapse as the story goes on. But that said, speaking of plot, you requested to go into the story, so let's go into it. The story takes place on the frontier side, which is where the Federation's building new colonies. And it just so happens that there's a beauty pageant happening, which I have no idea why this beauty pageant was fit into the movie, but it happens. So it kicks us off almost exactly like the original series. We have these new mobile suits breaking into the colony, just like we had the Zaku's breaking into in the original series to the colony. But these are Den and Zons. These aren't Zaku's. They break in and they just start shooting up the place, trying to conquer the colony. They're actually not there to take the Gundam. This story isn't really revolving around the F91 until like the halfway point, which I thought was weird. So the opening half of the movie is really the Crossbone Vanguard showing up to the frontier side and taking control of the colonies. I think they're taking Frontier 4.
That's right. Yeah, Frontier 4. And I thought this part, I don't know about you, but I thought this part was actually pretty effective. Like, the Crossbone Vanguard came in, and they really just kind of owned the place right away. Like, they did some smart things. They flew into the colony. They shot up the capital ships the Federation capital ships who had no idea what was going on, instead of leaving them there to, like, retaliate later. No, they walked straight in, and they were like, oh, there's the ship, and they blew it up, and that was it. There was no sort of resistance, to them.
What I thought was really interesting was that, like, they shoot their little claws into the bridge, and like the ship doesn't explode in like a hail of fire. It seems like whenever a Zaku shot like the bridge, like the whole ship would just ignite, right? The solidness would just be gone no matter where you hit it.
Yeah.
But I guess the Crossbone Vanguard really engineered things to not blow up their future landing base.
yeah, and that's key. As Isaac said, they were there to take the colony. So
yeah. And okay, so story starts off, and at the pageant, this beauty pageant on the colony, we meet our protagonist, Seabook Arno, and I've decided to take it upon myself and give Seabook Arno the trophy for the worst name of a Gundam pilot main character, because all they had to do was switch the names, right? Arno Seabook, we could have been fine with that. This has driven me crazy since I read about F91, right? Because I thought Seabook is a pretty cool name and kind of realistic, but Arno has the last name and Seabook is the first name. It's just terrible. So I don't know what happened in their writing room for this to happen. But anyways, I digress.
Well, I think Tomino, the creator of Gundam, he always chooses very creative and unique names. And I think this was just another one of those, and it's definitely unique. I've never heard Seabook anywhere else before, just like I've never heard Char Aznable or Amuro Ray.
Let me say this, though. Amuro Ray sounds like it could be someone's real name. Right?
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah.
Char and Amuro sound way more realistic than Seabook Arno.
Yeah.
But anyways, all right. So the Den and Zon show up. Crossbow Vanguard shows up, attacks the colony. People are like running for their lives. Some escape. Some decide to hide in the shelters. Crossbow Vanguard actually takes control of the colony, right? Like you were saying, Brian, we get very close eyewitness view of just the sheer brutality, like the civilian side of what a colony attack is like. And this was maybe some of the most brutal images in a while, right? We saw like that woman whose head gets kind of bashed in by the shell casing.
Yeah, that was terrible.
Yeah, she was holding a baby at the time too. And they saved the baby. Yeah, and then Arthur, remember yeah.
I liked Arthur. He was a good guy.
We saw so little. Like I felt like there's this character named Arthur listeners, and he gets killed quickly. And I think they wanted his death to be more impactful than it was because we've known him for like 3 minutes in the story. And yeah, he doesn't get blown up outright. He like there's an explosion and he gets thrown by the force against like a wall and he dies from the impact of that. But Seabook's there, so this really shows, I guess, the sheer brutality of war. And this whole time, let me remind you, there's no Gundam. The Gundam has not shown up during this combat. This invasion. It's just Seabook and like his little teenage friends, and they're kind of on like just running, fleeing from the battle, trying to escape.
I don't know about you, but I actually liked his group of friends. And I think maybe if we had gotten more of a series, maybe we would have seen more of them. But I think overall, his little group of friends, I feel like they had promise. But obviously, given the timing, they kind of dropped off.
I'll say this though, I thought Sam might have been the worst designed character because he's like, I don't know if he was like an Elton John tribute or something, but he had like these huge glasses and like this burning bush of an orange like mop on his head, and I thought like, wow, really, this was the best character design we could get. Okay,
hey, well, it was unique. Okay.
I remember him, but not in the right way. We also see the Federation really being their worst version of themselves, because there's a scene where they try to use these children that Seabook is fleeing with as human shields, and I was like, of course they're going to run across that Federation officer. Let me say this, Brian.
And not only do we see them at their worst, but there are multiple times in this film where they literally say the most outrageous plot point out loud, right? Because if you hear Isaac say they're going to use them as human shields, you may have thought they didn't actually say that out loud, but no, literally in the movie, the commander guy goes, "Let's use those kids as human shields. That way they can't shoot us."
Yeah, I mean, I can't even say in his defense, but the situation was the Federation has clearly lost the battle, right? There's these crossbone vanguards. They've essentially taken over whatever's left of the Federation forces is bare bones. So yeah, there must be 2 Federation academies, right, Brian? There's one where they teach you to be like a hero, right? Like Bright Noah or General Revel. And then there's another one where they teach you to use children as human shields.
Yeah, that's the Basque Ohm Academy of warfare.
Jamatov's school for sociopathic officers. Okay. Anyways, we also see this weird scene where like Seabook's dad, he blinds like a Federation pilot with a welding torch. I didn't really understand what happened there, because I would think a welding torch couldn't possibly damage a mobile suit, but what do I know?
Maybe he turned it up real high. Okay.
Yeah, I guess. And this whole time, as Seabook and the main characters are fleeing the battle, happening inside the colony, they're inside like this variant of a tank mobile suit, some type of transforming gun tank. Mm-hmm. And what I didn't understand was how can like 8 adults and like 10 children fit inside this mobile suit that's designed for like one pilot. For me, that kind of was like, okay, this must be a variant that has it's the cargo troop transport gun tank or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyways, let me say this also about Azuma. Azuma was kind of like, he was the only character that kept his cool. That's why I really liked Azuma.
Wait, which one was Azuma?
Azuma is like, he kind of had like a mop haircut, really small eyes.
Oh, yep. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I agree. He always had a cool head for the most part.
Yeah, he wasn't panicking like anybody else. He wasn't deciding to shoot or anything. He was just logically focused on like the next steps and how we can escape or survive.
And although you didn't like Sam's design, he also had a pretty cool head most of the film, I think. And he was also pretty useful.
Yeah, he was actually willing to fight. Remember? Yeah, they're using bazookas for a while, trying to. Well, I don't know how successful they thought they could be, but
it didn't end well for Arthur.
No. Speaking of effectiveness, listeners, the reason the Crossbone Vanguard is doing so well against the Federation garrison is because they're using this is the first appearance of miniature mobile suits. So every Crossbone Vanguard mobile suit is a miniature mobile suit, which is roughly 2/3 the size of a normal mobile suit. So they're faster, they're more maneuverable, and they're a smaller target to hit.
So I read something about this on the wiki page, which I had never heard of before. the in-show explanation is that these are cheaper to produce and they're more maneuverable and they're faster and they can kind of fly around on the bigger suits. But apparently the real reason they scaled down the suits was because Tomino wanted to make it easier to make model kits.
That doesn't really make sense though, because model kits are produced like. Okay, go on, Brian.
Well, but you have to remember, so up to this point, suits had been increasing in size, right? So the RX-78 was 18 meters. And by the time of Char's counterattack, the new Gundam was 22 meters. So that's a pretty big relative increase in size. And so if you're still producing the same scale model kit, you're getting more and more plastic as suits get bigger. And actually, we're about to see the suits get even bigger. If you've seen Char's counterattack, Unicorn, the suits are just as big, if not bigger, in Unicorn than in Char's counterattack, and we're about to see even bigger suits in Hathaway's Flash. Wow. And so, if you're using more plastic, you're using more materials. The goal was, hey, let's make model kits easier to make if we're going to sell the same scale, which is primarily either 1/144 or 1/100. So the F91 is 15 meters, and these Crossbone Vanguard suits, the Denenzons, they're roughly about the same size. But ironically, apparently, the smaller size ended up increasing the production costs of model kits because they had to redesign all the joints to be smaller.
Oh, God.
So it didn't really work out.
No, but in universe miniature mobile suits, I guess they make a sense, right? Like,
they do. I think so, yeah.
Yeah, technology marched on, and here we are. Oh, this is also the first appearance of beam shields, which, if you haven't seen F91 or you're only familiar with, 1 Year War, beam shields are exactly what they sound like. It's a shield made out of beam energy, just like a beam saber. Just think of a shield version. So it incinerates shots that are fired at it and gives a good degree of protection to the wielder. And unfortunately for the Federation, it seems like every Crossbone Vanguard mobile suit has a beam shield. So they're pretty hard to kill. It's not impossible, but it's much more difficult.
Yeah, you have to hit it like on the shield part, basically.
Yeah. What I also noticed was really cool about this point in the movie is that we actually see civilians getting to boats and ships and evacuating. So they get to the space boats, try to book it out of there. It seems like a lot in Gundam. Like if something ever is happening at a colony, people just run to a shelter and like bunker in place and hope for the best, and that almost always goes bad for the colonists, right? Because some faction uses a nuke or gas, or someone blows a hole in the colony. So if you're a listener and you're ever inside a colony and like a battle starting, get out of the colony. Don't stay in the colony. Don't wait for those slow shelter doors to close. Just get out of the colony. Am I right, Brian? I mean,
no, you're right. I mean, look, if this was the real world, if this was on Earth and you went into a nuclear bunker that was far enough down, yeah, you'd probably be okay. You wouldn't be okay from the radiation when you get back outside, but you'd probably at least survive the explosion. But if you're in a colony, there's not that much protection. There's no, it's not quite as big. You're gonna die, whether it's a nuke or whether it's we saw in Origin, we saw the gas attack. Well, the bunker clearly wasn't airtight because everyone inside the bunker died.
Yeah. Oh boy. Well, I mean, they're getting their air from somewhere in the colony, so it's a closed system. Yeah. But yeah. Okay. So at this point in the story, Seabook he's taking control of the gun tank variant, and he's running around looking for Cecily, who was his friend that he knew from the pageant. So she was the winner of the pageant. She's the belle of the ball. He's looking for her, and he runs across her, sort of in a struggle with her stepdad. Like a genius, he decides to never close his cockpit. So he takes a few shots in there from her stepdad, who's wielding a gun and has awareness that the Crossbone Vanguard were coming. So her dad runs a bakery, and this whole time, this whole attack, he was out running about looking for Cecily, and he found her. While Seabook is wounded, guess who shows up? It's this new villain called Lord Dorrell. Lord Dorrell is piloting another Crossbone mobile suit. And let me just say this about the Crossbone mobile suits. I really like the goggle design. It comes off as really sinister. The Denizons kind of have like these German helmet looking things. That looks cool too. They don't have the mono eye like Zeon. They all just pretty much use either sort of a visor or the goggles. But I thought the Crossbone Vanguard had a really interesting look. Nobody really goes for charcoal gray mobile suit colors. Most factions throughout the UC really have colorful designs if you think about it, like Zanskare, and I think they favored a lot of yellow, and Yeah,
They
out
had
there.
some interesting styles for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. The Denizans were pretty neat, man. I really like those. I thought those were pretty cool. And then yeah, even Darrell's suit, the Berga Dallas, I think.
Something like that.
I thought it was pretty sweet looking.
Yeah, Crossbone Vanguard suits. It looks like almost all of them have this cool weapon called a shot lancer, and what that does is it looks a lot like a lance, and it can fire out, but it doesn't explode upon contact. It sort of drills into like an enemy mobile suit, and it keeps sort of propelling and moving. So once it kind of sticks in you, I guess think of it like a spear that I guess has inertia in it or some type of thruster that keeps pushing you. So once you're stuck, you just get pushed into a wall or just pushed out of the way. Who knows what they make them out of? Whatever it is, they should probably make their whole mobile suit out of that indestructible material. But anyways,
but they're great for fighting in colonies, basically, because they're not going to cause everything to explode. So
yeah. So when we see Lord Dorrell, he continues my theory of at some point F91 production was told this has to be Gundam by the numbers because Dorrell looks like and acts like a competent Garma. He's got like kind of purple hair. He's this little royal prince guy. And except the only difference between him and Garma is he's actually competent. He seems really good at combat. He seems to know what's going on. And yeah, he's not, turning to Sharf to actually do field work or whatever. But anyways, yeah, this is also the point in the story where things start to kind of fizzle out in the plot because
I agree.
Yeah,
I'm glad you said that because this is the exact turning point that I felt as well. I thought we were on the rails. Like I was watching this for the third time and I was like, this is so bad. I was like, I don't know what everyone's talking about. And then we got to the part where Cecily became separated from Seabook, and that's this part where they take Cecily away, and that's when we hit. I don't know. That's when someone just threw the lever into like light speed, and we just went. Whoom.
The flux capacitor is on.
Like holy cow, man. So yeah, this is where it goes off the rails to me. But this is also where we learn the big twist of the movie, right?
In a stunning twist, Cecily is related to the leaders of the Crossbone Vanguard. And she goes with Lord Dorrell because he claims that they can help find her mother, which I thought this was just bad writing because the few comments we've heard about the Crossbone Vanguard so far from like a few Federation characters is that they're a pirate fleet. So how does going with a pirate fleet help you find your mother? So that was just raised a big question mark for me. But apparently Cecily that's not her real name. Her real name is Vera. And Cecily's been her secret name, as she's in hiding. So, all right.
Wait, is it Bera? I thought it was Bera.
Oh, Vera or Bera.
Okay.
I've seen different. Yeah, I was watching a dub. Brian, sorry, I
watched the dub. I watched the dub this time. So.
I watched the sub. Brian watched the dub.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, but you know what? We're agreeing on everything so far. So clearly, the translation or the audio.
There's quite a few differences. Like, so the dub definitely said Bera, and for Darrell, I know Darrell is written everywhere, but I swear that the dub pronounces his name Jarrell, and that actually makes more sense in English.
Yeah, but then again, in Gundam, I always assume whatever name they're telling me, that was the name they meant because all the names are so weird. At this point in the story, Seabook's friends have actually managed to get to a space boat, so they're heading out the colony. But this was a cool scene. Okay, they're leaving, and Mr. Arno, Seabook's dad, who he ran into, and helped them all along the way, he decides to stay behind and help this little girl that's like lost. So I thought that was a really cool scene. We don't see that often.
Yeah, Seabook's dad was he was a G. He was a good guy.
He's the GOAT. He's a real MVP.
Yeah.
He wins the best dad award in Gundam.
He really does. Yeah, he was a good.
Temray.
Yes.
Yusaku. Oh, sorry, I'll watch my French, but.
Well, you're okay. Mr. Arno puts Temray to shame, but Mrs. Arno is probably maybe a little closer to Temray, so we'll get there. But
we'll get to that woman. Good. Anyways, okay, so we sort of start hearing more stuff about like the Crossbone Vanguard at this point. They talk about like Cosmo aristocracy, and it just sounds so odd when we compare it to Zeon because. As much as Zeon was just a dictatorship ruled by this family that decided to make themselves, the sovereigns and all that, the principality, they never really called their government anything weird, right?
Yeah.
But Crossbone Vanguard just on day 0, on hour 3 of the invasion, they decide to say we're the Cosmo aristocracy, our territory is called Cosmo Babylonia, and we are the Crossbone Vanguard. I thought these were kind of a lot of names and concepts that throw at the audience that required like reading to actually grasp, you know?
Yeah, I agree. And while they are different from Zeon, they did have like these banners and this gathering of soldiers that did evoke Zeon. But then you're right. Once Ronah got to the podium and spoke, you know, he starts talking about Cosmo Babylonia. He says it's founded now, and we are realizing the 1,000-year-old dream of the Ronah family, which is the guarantee of the survival of humanity. And I was just like, what? Who is this family? Where have they been for 1,000 years? And how are you guaranteeing the survival of humanity by shooting up this colony? So I don't know. What did you think of that? And then, you know, maybe tell us a little bit about one of your pals, Caruso Ronah.
Sure. Like I just said, they throw a lot at the audience, and so much of it goes over the audience's head compared to sort of the slow build we got with Zeon, right? Where we can kind of understand there's a group of colonies that break away, make a new government, and decide to attack Earth. Here, though, this faction we've never heard of, we don't know where they're from, we don't know how they got their mobile suits. They invade a colony, and they start talking about aristocracy and Cosmo Babylonia, and you know the power of the nobility, and you know you need to be a noble and all that. The uninformed person, it would fly over your head. I had to go back and read about the Crossbone Vanguard to figure and the Ronahs to figure out what happened. So sit down and buckle up for 2 minutes and let me tell you the pre F91 that you're probably gonna have to like read a wiki about to fully grasp what was happening. Okay, there was a family called the Butch, Buch, and they had a company called the Butch Concern. This company had its own flight division. The Butch Concern, owned by the Butch family, wanted to be royalty. So they purchased a royal name, which was the Ronah name. So they became Ronahs, and they turned their company into essentially the front of the Crossbone Vanguard. And they had this whole plot leading into F91 to take over the frontier side, and that's where they would build, you know, this insane aristocracy ruled society idea.
But how far back does the Butch family go? Caruso was on the mic saying it's a 1,000-year-old dream. Have they been doing this since like 1000 AD-ish?
Buddy, the Butch Concern has been focused on the salvage industry and scrap metal industry in the Earth sphere. That's where this illustrious line comes from.
Okay.
So there's no way this was a 1,000-year dream. The leader of the Crossbone Vanguard, who we're going to meet in a bit, this is all his idea, all right? This isn't some 1,000-year dream, okay? He had to purchase this royal name. So this guy's so insane, so out there. Say what you will about Daewin, but he didn't go out of his way to like purchase a royal name from some, you know, dead or disappeared family and then start his own plot about how he was really a nobleman and an aristocrat. No, the zombies just got power. They didn't really worry about anybody caring about their last name or, you know, where they came from and all that. So yeah, that's the background on the Crossbone Vanguard's genesis.
But see, that's helpful.
I saved you a wiki article.
That's helpful background. That's something that we would have gotten had this been a 50-episode series. So that's why I'm saying if you're watching this today and you've never seen it, just keep in mind that you're going to be pelted with these advances in plot of 3 episodes every 5 minutes.
Yeah, and let me just say this. The Crossbone Vanguard, to an extent, they kind of out-Zeon because I thought their uniforms were pretty interesting, and there's a scene in the movie where they kind of go, you know, full fascist. You know, they have like this little military march. There's, you know, the flags and the little
beam flags.
Real flags and beam flags and little fascist uniforms. You know, Caruso does get up there and give a speech. But even before we see Caruso's speech, the writing, I felt, or at least the story structure, wasn't great because the first time we meet Caruso, and let me remind you, this is a man in a mask. He's in a metal or iron mask, tall, imposing guy, military uniform. Clearly some Darth Vader vibes. They probably watched Star Wars and based it, you know, on him.
Well, I believe the Imperial March is part of the
Crossbone theme.
Part of the Crossbone theme. So
stole it.
Clearly, you know, Darth Vader inspired, which is actually ironic because Darth Vader's design is based on I believe it's based on samurais. So this is like a double. This is like a reverse inspiration here.
Yeah, but we meet Kurozo and he's sitting behind a desk, which, as far as meeting a villain, might be the worst way to introduce your main villain in a story. It's not threatening at all. There's no reason they couldn't have rewritten the story to have Kurozo commanding the invasion right from the bridge of a ship. And yeah, I had to write down in my notes that this was a mistake. This is characterization mistake.
Well, and also when we first meet him, he denigrates himself as well.
Yeah, he's got some issues. He's separated from his wife, and he took the separation so bad he decided to put on an iron mask and become a cyber new type. So, man, yeah.
I did like though that we immediately got an explanation for the mask.
Yeah.
Even if it was like,
it's a shame mask.
I don't know. There's certain like rules in fiction where you don't just say character motivations out loud. Like you never want to have the character just straight up say, "This is who I am." Usually,
right?
I think.
Yeah.
But I think given the amount of time here, they basically had Kurozo basically say, "Well, I'm a pathetic man because I lost my wife, and so I wear this mask." And I was like, "Okay, well, thank you for that explanation," because I was wondering why you had that mask on.
In the UC timeline, is like divorce rare or something? Like,
I don't know.
The Federation frowns on divorce, so like the fact that they separate, it's like it's a societal shame he has to bear.
I don't know.
Okay, speaking of characterization, once again going back to how to an extent this story might have been Gundam by the numbers. Cecily is the only member of the Crossbone Vanguard that wears red. So I thought maybe the original plan was she would sort of grow up into be the female Char of the story. She'd be this great pilot. She'd be sort of a main opponent that's kind of an anti-hero. And she'd actually be on the enemy faction. But we'd never find out because Gundam F91 is a self-contained movie. We also meet the actual head of state of the Crossbone Vanguard. It's kind of their figurehead leader, not really their military leader. It's Ronah, who's Cecily's grandfather. And he's more or less a Daegwin that exercises and eats healthy because he's an he's an old man. He kind of just sits on a throne and tells people what to do, but doesn't really actually know a lot of what's happening day to day. But
he has a much more comforting and sane atmosphere than Kurozo does, and then we'll see why later on. But I thought this part was interesting because the family relationship here is very complicated, and you only figure it out through a few lines throughout the movie. You got the grandfather, who's Maitza. You've got Kurozo, who at least it seems like the way it's presented that he's the son of Maitza, but he's not. He married in.
And he's still there.
Yeah. So he married in, but he lost his wife to another guy named Theo. But he's still there, sort of commanding the military. And then you have his ex-wife, Nadia, Cecily, or Bera's mother. And then you have Cecily. But the guy we saw earlier, Jarrell, they consider him to be a family member as well. So you think, oh, this is Cecily's brother then. But he's not. He's adopted. So
he's adopted, but he has the same hair color as like Kurozo in the flashback.
Right. So this family's just got like, if you did like a little chart, they got a lot of like dotted lines and just like weird, weird things going on. So again, I think that would have all been maybe explored more had we gotten more time with these people, but we didn't. So just
This family is as artificial as their last name. But anyways, we also see when they get this little big reunion in like the throne room, there's some writing issues too, I think, or pacing issues at least, because Meitzer's already their leader, but he tells Cecily like within seconds of meeting her, we'd like you to be the queen of the Crossbone Vanguard of Cosmo Babylonia. And he's already their leader. Why do they need a queen? I didn't.
Well,
again, that.
I think a lot of things that Cecily does in this film make no sense, and I think that's because we only had 2 hours to get through 50 episodes. You already pointed out one, which is her going with Darrell. She kind of just said, "Okay, sounds good," and she kind of got in the mobile suit and they flew off. This part as well, they asked her to be queen, and you're thinking, okay, well, she just saw him like shoot up the colony. They killed her friend. Why would she do this? And she's kind of like, okay, I'll do it. I'll be queen. So that she goes and cuts her hair and puts on the red. And at this point, you really think like you're kind of confused as the audience member of like, is this a feint? Like, is she getting ready to double cross him somehow? But we find out later on that I don't think it really was a feint, or at least based on what she says. She kind of was gonna do it, and she felt she could do a good job or something like that. So anyway, I think Cecily's character was really harmed by not having enough time to maybe make these decisions make more sense.
Yeah, she's been with the Crossbone Vanguard for the greater part of a day, and she's still not looking for her mother. She's just kind of going along with whatever they tell her to do. Speaking of what you just said right now, Brian, not having enough time to continue certain plot threads, there's a point in the story where Seabook says something really interesting. He says the colonies, looked very European, and he was wondering if someone in the Federation was working with the Crossbone Vanguard. And I thought that's such a Federation thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
To actually work with to have like a few corrupt Federation people actually working with the Crossbone Vanguard, and the frontier side was purposely built to pretty much get taken over.
Agree. Yeah, I'm glad you caught that as well. I wrote that down in my notes too, and I thought, wow, that's a really interesting plot thread. And then we never hear about it again. Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure the Crossbone Vanguard is like very strict. Like, you really can't make our colony look like another culture. It can't. The architecture can't be Asian. It can't be American, or it's gonna have to look very European for us to work with our military.
Yep. So I bet if we got a 50 episode show, maybe around episode 45 or in the 40s somewhere, it would have came out that the Federation and the Crossbone Vanguard had there was some connection there the whole time.
Yeah.
But we had to settle for one off the cuff line by Seabook, which I don't even think he said out loud. I think it was like, it may have even been like an internal thought.
Right. Or he said to like one person, maybe, I don't know. Maybe it was a Zuma, but
you have to wonder if Tomino was like, no, I really want that line in there because I thought that was a good idea. But then it never comes up again in the rest of the movie.
Maybe, I don't. Yeah, it really interesting though to think about that possible conspiracy. But we get these cool shots now that the colony is essentially under Crossbone Vanguard control. They start painting their logo on the outside of the colony. I thought that was really interesting. They have like this weird, I forgot what it's called. It's like that Babylonian eagle bird thing with like the sun.
Yeah, it was a cool logo, and I really appreciated that they didn't waste any time, right? They were like, all right, the colony's ours, let's go paint it. Like, they had that paint ready to go. Like, they brought it with them.
Exactly, that little paint robot's ready to go. This is also a point where we see the Federation kind of strike back, and to their credit, they have a pretty good plan. They fly in like with a flake asteroid that gets instantly destroyed, but they're still there to continue the fight. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Unfortunately, this is also the point in the story where we meet one of the worst named main capital ships in a Gundam series, the Space Ark. Brian, what did you think of the Space Ark as a name and as a ship?
Well, I think it suffered from a few things. I don't actually have a huge problem with the name, given that it was basically like a refugee ship. But it was kind of just a boring design, I felt. It didn't look significantly different to me in all the fast-paced action than like a Rockeye Loom. So I did get it confused with like, I was like, is that the Space Ark or like what ship am I watching right now? So I had a few of those moments. It was okay. It definitely, as the flagship of the show, I wasn't super impressed like I would be with the Argama or the White Base or something like that.
Well, I'll say this: it's underwhelming in the least and forgettable. But we needed a ship, so they had to check that off the checklist, right? We have our little white capital ship, and of course the F91 is in it. So there you go. That's how we get the F91 in the story. It was on this ship. But anyways. Yes. Back at Cosmo Babylonia, they're battling it out with whatever's left of the Federation capital ships outside the colony. And the Federation, I don't know if this is standard procedure or just this is how the battle went, but their beams start going into the colony.
Yeah, they fired indiscriminately sort of at the colony, which was not a good idea because the beams went right through the colony.
Right, and I mean, on the one hand, I guess this is now an enemy colony, right? So they're in combat in a war zone. But on the other hand, maybe 23 hours earlier, these were Federation citizens. So,
right. And not all of them seem to have left yet because people started flying through the holes again.
Yeah,
with the brutality aspect.
Yeah, and these beams though aren't hitting just civilian areas. They come really close to the Crossbone Vanguard Palace. I guess that means the Crossbone Vanguard had less control than they thought. But Cecily has this really kind of weird, interesting conversation with Meitzer or Meitza on your version. They're sort of talking like, in their robes because I guess it's night. They don't want to sleep because the battle's going on. And Meitzer says, "Oh, I didn't let the Crossbone Vanguard hurt a single civilian." And this just shows how disconnected he was from reality, I think, because say what you will about the zombies, but they knew they were killing innocent people. So Meitzer, whether it's Carozo or just Meitzer's own ignorance, but he's really insulated from what exactly happened to take the colony.
Yeah.
And Meitzer's definition of a noble person is just really someone who can stand their ground in battle or something. So this guy's got some really weird ideas. It's this whole Cosmo aristocracy, Cosmo Babylonia. It doesn't have as much weight, I think, as like Zeon or
Yeah, I mean, that conversation was helpful though to the story because it did give you a little bit of a clearer picture of what he was trying to do, or at least what he thinks he's trying to do. Because he says that he's trying to found Cosmo Babylonia because humanity's future for the moment is still in space, because the Earth is still healing. And although people are going back, only the rich and the powerful are going back, not the rest of humanity. And that was interesting to me because that's a theme that we continue to see in Gundam. We've seen that in the first series a little bit. It's going to come up again in Hathaway's Flash. Here it is again in F91. So clearly the whole kind of rich versus poor and who gets to inhabit the Earth or what parts of the Earth. Clearly that's something that Tomino enjoys writing about, and that's a point that he wants to make. So I don't know, point taken, Tomino.
Something interesting happens after this. Seabook tries to sneak into Cecily's room at the palace. So he goes back to the colony and decides to sneak in.
Oh, yeah. So on that note, before we get there, there was a lot of like weird jumps in this part of the movie because after we first meet all the Cosmo Babylonia people, all of a sudden we just like jump right to a different colony where the space arc is with our heroes.
Yeah,
they're now on Frontier 1, but we didn't see them go there or anything. They just showed up. I literally rewound the film a few times to make sure that I didn't miss anything, because I was like, in my notes I wrote okay, here we jump ahead like 10 episodes because we saw them sort of leave, and then they were just, I don't know, somewhere different, and we had no idea, and they were just acting like we should know where they were. So that was weird. And then we get, like you said, so then all the stuff happens with the Crossbone Vanguard. We get the conversation between Cecily and her grandpa, and then boom, all of a sudden Seabook is like in Frontier 1 again, and you're just like, okay, well, I guess he flew over here of his own accord. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it was, oh boy.
And because at that point I was like, they are on two different colonies, right? Because we were jumping back and forth very quickly.
Yeah, and I think what barely helps, it doesn't even help. Frontier 1 looks almost like a vacant colony. Like it's just nature almost. But, Frontier 4 is actually city and all that. That's why the Crossbone Vanguard took over. But still, it wasn't explained. The pace, we're having pacing issues, people. But yeah, Seabook ends up back at Frontier 4. Crossbone Vanguard has terrible security at their palace because he pretty much just hops a fence, runs through bushes, and like jumps in a window.
Yep.
And he's talking to Cecily, and the guards already spotted him, or someone in the palace already spotted him. And this part shows that Cecily's a terrible friend, because Zabine, who is like this ace pilot, kind of their Crossbone Vanguard stand-in for Char. He's got the blonde curly hair and like an eye patch. He bursts in the room, and she doesn't even tell him not to shoot. He just starts shooting at Seabook. So
yes. And but I think around this time in the film too, we had a few more sort of weird things that happened that just, again, pacing disaster. Cecily gets pilot training around this time, and there's a part where a lot of stuff happens in about 10 seconds. You see her climb down from a mobile suit, and they basically say, "Wow, you're a really good pilot." And so at this point, Cecily has now been deemed a good pilot, and that occurred in about 5 to 10 seconds of her just that was all you got. That was it. Like that was her pilot training. It took place within a day, and you saw her climb down from what must have been a training session, and Zabine, I think, was training her, and he's like, "Oh," he says something to the effect of, "Okay, well, good thing you're a natural and you're good to go. And this suit is now yours over here. And so now we have, boom, Cecily's on the level of the Ace Pilot crew. Did you notice that as well?
Yeah, it was very much exposition, right? It was, we just got back from, our training, you're a natural, and then like other pilots are observing too, like, oh, we had to wait for her or whatever, right? And then it was like,
and then similar to that, Seabook was deemed the F91 pilot because, paraphrasing, they basically said, well, we have no one else, so you basically have to be the pilot. And then Seabook was like, yeah, I mean, I might as well do it, right? And, and so,
well,
boom,
your mom designed it, so
there's our Gundam pilot right there. So again, everything here would be a complete episode.
While he's snuck at the colony too, Kurozo gives this speech, and he takes a bullet to the face, but fortunately he has an iron mask and the bullet deflects. But after the bullet, there's an explosion on the roof. Brian, did you have a thought on what that was exactly, or?
I assumed that was the Crossbone Vanguard retaliating from where the shot came from.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. But it seemed a bit
excessive.
Or maybe not excessive. I don't know. Like, when if someone tries to shoot like a world leader, don't they, send goons over there? I don't think they actually like blow up the building.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you would probably try to apprehend him, I would imagine, or it was the person who shot him blowing himself up. Yeah. I don't know, one of the two.
But sadly, this is also a scene where we lose one of our characters. Seabook's dad and him are in this van, and they're on the run, and they take a shot, I think, from a mobile suit in the rear of their van, and the rear half blows up. But for some reason, Seabook's dad dies. I didn't really.
Yeah, it wasn't clear what his injury was either. He didn't die right away, which I guess. I mean, maybe it was a gunshot wound, or some sort of internal injury. I'm not particularly clear.
We'll say shrapnel went through.
Yeah, but anyway, I mean, yeah, Seabook takes him in the Gundam, and he dies kind of on the way back to Frontier 1.
Right.
But that's kind of when you put the pieces together, like, oh, Seabook made it to Frontier 4, him and his dad, they must have snuck out, because that wasn't really explained beforehand. Seabook was just like in Frontier 4.
No, but we jump it back again to some banter between Zabine and Crossbone Vanguard pilots, and they're discussing rumors of some type of new weapon that can kill large numbers of people, and it's called, I think they say bugs, or what's codenamed Bug.
And we're gonna cut it there for this episode. Rest in peace, Mr. Arno. At least you went before the bugs could get you. Next week we'll conclude our review of Gundam F91's plot, Kurozo's scheme, and those sweet, sweet Crossbone Vanguard mecha designs. Please like, comment, and subscribe. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts, and on Twitter at Colony Dropcast. Until then, keep those Minovsky reactors warm, stay safe out there, and have a great week, everybody.